G'day everyone, this is the 2025 Volkswagen Amarok. Look, they've even written it there on the tray for us. And it's the next long-termer to come through the Chasing Cars garage. Specifically, this is an Amarok PanAmericana, and it's going to be in my driveway for the next 3 months. And just like the Triton I've recently given back to Mitsubishi, this thing is about to go through the ringer. And in today's video, we're going to take a quick look at why we chose the Volkswagen Amarok for our next long-termer in 2025, see where it sits in the current day, is it even still relevant? Also discuss our first impressions and our plans for the future. But before we get stuck into things, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below if you want to see more content like this. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. So why have we gone for the Amarok as our next long-termer? Well, two reasons really. One, utes are still a big deal in this country, and two, the Amarok is one that we've really championed as being a high bar in this segment ever since it came out in 2023. Now this is of course a very, very close collaboration with Ford. Volkswagen really makes no secret about this. You only have to go as far as the brakes to see FOMOCO or Ford Motor Corporation written on this vehicle. But I really do think it is a connection that brings merit to this vehicle, though there are a lot of the Volkswagen faithful are a little bit disappointed that the Volkswagen still didn't go at this one alone. But you do have to feel a little bit sorry for the Amarok. In terms of sales, this sells maybe 10%, 11% of what the Ranger has so far this year. And do I think the Ranger is 10 times a better vehicle than this one? Well, certainly not. You guys might remember we actually had a Ford Ranger Wildtrak as a long-termer previously, and that was a very good vehicle, but it had one big drawback, and that was the price. It was an extremely expensive vehicle, and it warranted a whole lot of option packs on top of its base price for the Wildtrak V6. And this is where the Amarok might be starting to have an edge. See, perhaps in a bit of an effort to shift a few more of these things in Australia, Volkswagen has launched an absolute ripper of an end of financial year deal where they've taken $8,000 off the price of this Amarok PanAmericana, meaning it's around about $77 on the road, which is pretty impressive. And I think that really does paint it in a bit of a different perspective, because that makes it $10,000 cheaper than the Ranger Wildtrak that we had previously, and that is a lot of money. So as the Ranger becomes more and more popular, more and more hated by a lot of people on the road, and this becomes cheaper, has the Amarok actually become the smart person's buy in the Australian market? That's something I'm looking to find out during my 3-month tenure. So in terms of my first impressions, this is where I let you guys know a little secret. See, normally in our long-term introduction videos, we would have had the car for 1 or 2 weeks, but I was a bit of a cheeky bugger because about a week after I got this, I went on a full month's holiday, and really I spent this time just reconfirming what we already know about the Amarok. I took my family from Melbourne and drove them all the way to Adelaide, and I hitched up the in-laws 2.5-ton caravan, and this thing towed like a dream. From there, I went and stayed down by the beach at a local caravan park, and pretty much every day we were loading up the tub and loading up the back seats with our kiddos and going down there, driving onto the beach, because you can do that in South Australia, and just having an absolute blast. It was really a great way to remind myself of all the great strengths about this vehicle, and that numbers on a few different fronts. First, let's just talk about towing. So it was a fairly simple 2.5-ton dual axle caravan, and we did a few 100 Ks in it, towing it there and back. And there were a couple of immediately obvious strengths. One, the 3-litre turbo diesel up front pulls like a train. It's such a lovely engine, and the 10-speed automatic transmission really does keep you in the power band quite nicely. Also the inherent stability, but there's also just a number of little features which make life nice and easy. Things like the ability to check your trailer lights by just pressing a mode on the touchscreen, and then it blinks on all the different lights to make sure it's working, so you can set up the car and van by yourself. But there's also another one that I really like, and that is a temperature monitor for the transmission, so you can keep an eye on it while you're doing your heavy towing, going up hills, and so you can make sure that your car is okay and in good conditions in those heavy towing situations. Now, we did take it on the beach, as I said, but I don't really count that as off-roading, because quite frankly, I was seeing Hyundai Getzers down there, so that doesn't really count in my books. That is one for a later date. But we did do a lot of highway driving, and I do think that once again, the Amarok PanAmericana stands out in its segment for how refined it was on the road, despite the fact that this grade does have all-terrain tyres on it. So definitely some good marks for it there as well. It was also a great time to appreciate the interior of the Amarok here, because I really do think it stands out in its segment for how luxurious, how well put together it is in a number of different points, starting with presentation. I really love the stitching across the dashboard here and the nice steering wheel here, which Volkswagen has wisely put big and clicky buttons. These are just fantastic. I own a Volkswagen Golf personally and has a very similar style steering wheel, and it's just one of the most intuitive steering wheels I've ever used. So that's really great to see. One thing that really stood out to me when I first picked up the Amarok was the fact that the backseat room really isn't great for the class. It's quite a bit smaller than the Triton I had previously, and when I do have rearwards facing baby seats fitted in there, it becomes quite restrictive to me, especially sitting at 6 foot tall. I can only have it on the passenger side for sure, and that does mean that it compromises the legroom of the front passenger here. So really not a good situation. There's also the fact that the bench here is all one piece, so you can't fold them down individually, and it also means that if I have to undo one baby seat to take it out and put it in another car, I have to undo both baby seats to take them out, which is a real pain, I gotta say. And look, it pains me to say this, but I also have to say that the V6 does come with some downsides. I love the power. It gets onto the highway like pretty much nothing else in segment that's not electric. But at the same time, it does like to drink. On the highway, I'm seeing around about 9 litres per 100 Ks, 10 or a bit above that around town. But when I compare that to the Triton I just got out of, which is using about 7 litres per 100 Ks, and I've seen many people use even less, it was a bit of a shock to the system. And if you're doing a big trip around Australia, you've got to think about the fact that that's going to add up. So perhaps for those customers who are doing those longer journeys, the bi-turbo might be worth a look. The other disappointing factor I did notice on this Amarok almost immediately after I picked up was some small build quality concerns. And the first one is in the tray here. So this is fitted with an electric roller turnover cover, and it does feature the usual gubbins that come with electric roller turnover cover, like wires, for example. Now, this isn't actually made by Volkswagen, this is made by someone else, but it is classified as a genuine accessory, and Volkswagen themselves have done the fitting. Now, one of the things that disappoints me about this setup is, unfortunately, when I first started to stack this tray full of stuff when I went away on my holiday, you might notice that in the very back here, the electric cables are hanging down, and you might also notice that they're only stuck on with pretty much just adhesive or double-sided tape. That is not very good fit and finish, and almost immediately it's come unstuck, and it's a bit of a nuisance. And if I'm honest, I'm a bit worried that it's going to get damaged as I use this Amarok on a long-term basis. Now, that part isn't made by Volkswagen, and you know, sometimes suppliers can just let you down, but this one is, and it's to do with the fuel cap. See, when I first opened this, it only had about 500 Ks on the clock, but it was time to fill it up once again. And I don't know if I just had a rough truck driver or something that used it previously, but when I went to open the fuel cap, I found that I actually had a small broken screw, and as a result, this thing just completely comes off. The small little screw that's supposed to go in this hole was already broken and then very soon lost. So one of those things, it's not the end of the world. It's just a 5-cent plastic screw, but it's not really great when it comes to your impressions with your brand new car. So we do have to point it out, unfortunately. So what do we have planned next for our long-term Amarok? Well, like always, we're gonna try and put 10,000 Ks on the clock. We're already about halfway there anyway, so I think we're looking pretty sweet, but we're gonna have to keep on it to make sure we test this thing properly. I also really wanna go and put this thing in a serious off-road test. We've taken this off-road before, and all my colleagues have told me that it's pretty good, but I wanna test it for myself. But for now, that is all for today's video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you wanna see our subsequent videos for our long-term Amarok and so much more. Comment down below, but for now, that's all. Thank you for watching Chasing Cars.